Is that never before have all 5 nominees for the Best Supporting Actor been nominated for the very first time.
And those gentlemen are...
Richard Jaeckel in Sometimes a Great Notion.
You've seen his face countless times, but never knew his name. Richard Jaeckel was Hollywood's dependable soldier, the tough guy who made every war movie feel real. For 50 years, he was the backbone of American cinema. Then, something heartbreaking happened. He didn't fall from grace in scandal or controversy. Instead, he simply faded away into silence. This is the story of a forgotten hero whose final years will shock you to your core. The unexpected beginning. Richard Hanley Jaeckel never planned to become an actor. Born on October 10, 1926 in Long Beach, New York, he moved to Los Angeles with his family during the Great Depression. His father worked hard to support the family, and young Richard understood the value of honest work from an early age. Unlike many Hollywood hopefuls who arrived with big dreams and bigger egos, Jaeckel found his way into movies purely by accident. Growing up during the Depression taught Jaeckel important lessons about survival and hard work. His family wasn't wealthy, and everyone had to contribute to keep food on the table. This background shaped his character in ways that would serve him well in Hollywood. He learned to be grateful for opportunities and never to take anything for granted. These values would stay with him throughout his entire career. In 1943, at just 17 years old, Jaeckel was working as a mailboy at 20th Century Fox. He was just trying to earn some money, delivering letters and packages around the studio lot. He had no acting experience, no training, and certainly no connections in the entertainment industry. But fate had other plans. A casting director spotted him walking across the lot and was struck by something in his appearance. There was a toughness about him, a natural authenticity that couldn't be taught in acting classes. The casting director's decision to approach young Jaeckel was unusual for the time. Most actors came through talent agencies or acting schools. But there was something about Jaeckel's natural presence that caught attention. He looked like a real person, not a polished Hollywood type. In an industry full of manufactured stars, his genuine quality stood out immediately. Almost overnight, Jaeckel found himself cast in Guadalcanal Diary, a major World War II film that would launch one of Hollywood's most enduring careers. The role was small but significant. He played a young Marine facing the horrors of war in the Pacific. What made his performance remarkable wasn't technical skill or polished delivery. It was something much rarer: complete believability. When audiences watched him on screen, they didn't see an actor playing a soldier. They saw a real person experiencing real fear, real courage, and real brotherhood. The late 1940s and early 1950s were crucial years for Jaeckel's career development. While he had gained recognition from Guadalcanal Diary, he still faced the challenge that confronted all young actors, proving he could handle different types of roles. The danger for any actor who found early success in military films was being typecast forever as just a soldier. Jaeckel was smart enough to recognize this trap and worked hard to avoid it. He took roles in different genres whenever possible, even if they paid less or had smaller parts. He appeared in crime dramas, westerns, and even comedies, always looking for ways to show his range. This strategy required patience and financial sacrifice, but it paid off in the long run. During this period, Jaeckel also developed his approach to character acting that would serve him throughout his career. He believed that every character, no matter how small, had a complete life story. Before filming, he would create detailed backgrounds for his characters, even if most of that information never appeared on screen. This preparation showed in his performances, giving even minor roles depth and authenticity. The Korean War era brought new opportunities for Jaeckel. Hollywood was producing many war films, and his reputation for realistic military performances made him a sought-after actor. But instead of just repeating his earlier successes, he looked for ways to bring something new to each role. He studied actual veterans, read military histories, and worked to make each soldier character unique. One of his most important early career lessons came from working with veteran actors who taught him about professionalism. He learned that being on time, knowing your lines, and treating everyone with respect weren't just nice gestures. They were essential for survival in Hollywood. These habits became second nature to him and contributed to his reputation as one of the most reliable actors in the business. Financial stability was always a concern during these early years. Character actors didn't earn star salaries, so Jaeckel had to work frequently to support himself and eventually his family. This meant accepting roles that weren't always ideal, but he approached even routine work with professionalism. He understood that every job was an opportunity to improve his craft and build relationships that might lead to better opportunities. Early career struggles and breakthroughs. The 1950s and 1960s marked the peak of Richard Jaeckel's career, though he would continue working for decades to come. During this period, he established himself as one of Hollywood's most versatile and dependable performers. His face became familiar to movie audiences around the world, even if they didn't always know his name. This was the era when Jaeckel proved he was much more than just another tough guy actor. One of his most memorable roles came in the 1957 classic 3:10 to Yuma, where he played Charlie Prince, a dangerous outlaw loyal to Glenn Ford's character. Jaeckel appeared in such classic westerns and war films as Sands of Iwo Jima, The Gunfighter, 3:10 to Yuma, and The Dirty Dozen. His performance in the film showcased his ability to bring complexity to what could have been a one-dimensional villain. Charlie Prince was menacing and unpredictable, but Jaeckel also gave him a twisted sense of loyalty and even moments of unexpected humor. Working in westerns presented new challenges for Jaeckel. The genre required different skills than war films: horseback riding, handling period weapons, and understanding the codes of the Old West. Jaeckel threw himself into learning these skills, spending time on ranches and with real cowboys to understand their world. This dedication to authenticity became his trademark. The late 1960s brought Jaeckel his biggest commercial success with The Dirty Dozen in 1967. The film featured an ensemble cast of major stars, including Lee Marvin, Charles Bronson, and Jim Brown. But Jaeckel more than held his own among these heavyweight performers. He played Sergeant Clyde Boren, a military trainer tasked with preparing condemned prisoners for a dangerous mission behind enemy lines. The Dirty Dozen was significant for Jaeckel's career in several ways. First, it was a massive commercial success that introduced him to international audiences. Second, it showed he could work effectively in ensemble casts with major stars without getting lost in the mix. Third, it demonstrated his ability to bring authority and credibility to military roles, something that would define much of his later career. What made Jaeckel's performance in The Dirty Dozen so effective was his ability to convey both authority and vulnerability. Boren was tough enough to handle dangerous criminals, but smart enough to be nervous about the mission ahead. Jaeckel brought a lived-in quality to the role that made audiences believe this was a real soldier, not just an actor in uniform. The film was a massive hit, and Jaeckel's performance was widely praised by critics and audiences alike. But perhaps his finest moment came in 1971 with Sometimes a Great Notion, based on Ken Kesey's novel about an Oregon logging family. Jaeckel played Joe Ben Stamper, the simple but good-hearted cousin who becomes trapped underwater during a logging accident. His performance was both heartbreaking and inspiring, showing a man facing death with grace and even humor. The role in Sometimes a Great Notion demonstrated Jaeckel's range as an actor. Joe Ben could have been played as merely comic relief or simple-minded support, but Jaeckel found the humanity in the character. He showed Joe Ben's genuine faith, his loyalty to family, and his childlike wonder at the world around him. When tragedy strikes, Jaeckel's performance becomes deeply moving without ever becoming sentimental. To prepare for the role, Jaeckel spent time with real loggers in Oregon, learning about their dangerous work and tight-knit communities. He understood that Joe Ben wasn't meant to be stupid. but rather someone with a different kind of intelligence, emotional and spiritual rather than intellectual. This insight made his performance both authentic and touching. The Academy Award nomination was well-deserved recognition for an actor who had been delivering excellent work for nearly 3 decades. Unfortunately, he lost to Ben Johnson for The Last Picture Show, but the nomination itself was a career highlight. For character actors, Oscar nominations were rare and precious, representing recognition from their peers that their work had real value. Throughout this period, Jaeckel also became increasingly active in television. He understood that television was becoming an important medium for actors, and he approached TV roles with the same professionalism he brought to feature films. Shows like Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and The Fugitive featured him in memorable guest appearances that showcased his versatility. Television work also provided steady income between film roles. The pay wasn't as good as movies, but TV offered more frequent work and the chance to play different types of characters. Jaeckel appreciated this variety and used television appearances to explore aspects of his talent that didn't always fit in his film roles. What's remarkable about Jaeckel's career during this period is his consistency. While many actors experienced ups and downs, Jaeckel maintained a steady output of quality work. Personal life and family values. Throughout his successful career, Richard Jaeckel managed to maintain a stable personal life that provided an anchor in the often chaotic world of Hollywood. In 1947, he married Antoinette Marchés, and their marriage would last 50 years until his death. This kind of lasting relationship was unusual in Hollywood, where divorces and scandals often dominated headlines. Antoinette was more than just a supportive spouse. She was Jaeckel's partner in navigating the entertainment industry. She understood the demands of his career, the uncertainty of acting work, and the need to maintain perspective in a business that could easily distort someone's sense of reality. Her practical nature complemented his work ethic perfectly. The couple had 2 children, and Jaeckel was determined to be a present father despite his demanding career. He turned down roles that would take him away from home for extended periods, especially when his children were young. This decision may have cost him some opportunities, but it reflected his priorities and values. Jaeckel's approach to parenting was influenced by his own upbringing during the Depression. He wanted his children to understand the value of hard work and to remain grounded despite their father's success in Hollywood. He taught them that fame was temporary and that character was more important than celebrity. The family lived modestly compared to many Hollywood families. Jaeckel didn't believe in flashy displays of wealth, preferring to save money for security and his children's education. This practical approach to finances would prove wise during his later health struggles. As a father, Jaeckel was known for his patience and gentle guidance. Colleagues who visited his home were often surprised by how different he seemed from his tough guy screen persona. With his family, he was warm, funny, and completely devoted. This contrast showed the depth of his acting ability. He could convincingly play hard men on screen while being a gentle family man at home. Jaeckel also maintained friendships throughout the industry that lasted decades. He was known for remembering people's birthdays, checking on colleagues who were going through difficult times, and celebrating others' successes without jealousy. These qualities made him genuinely popular among cast and crew members. His involvement in industry organizations showed his commitment to his fellow actors. He supported the Screen Actors Guild and participated in efforts to improve working conditions and benefits for character actors. He understood that stars got most of the attention, but working actors needed protection and support, too. Hollywood's changing landscape. As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, Richard Jaeckel found himself navigating a Hollywood that was rapidly changing. The studio system that had nurtured character actors like him was dissolving, replaced by a new focus on blockbuster spectacles and younger, flashier stars. While Jaeckel continued to work steadily, the types of roles available to him began to shift in ways that reflected the industry's new priorities. The rise of special effects-driven filmmaking meant that character development often took a back seat to visual spectacle. The kinds of intimate, character-driven dramas that had showcased Jaeckel's talents were becoming less common, replaced by action movies that prioritized explosions over emotional truth. For an actor whose greatest strength was bringing authentic humanity to his roles, this shift represented a fundamental challenge to everything he had built his career on. The new Hollywood was also becoming more youth-oriented. Studios discovered that teenage audiences were willing to see movies multiple times, making them incredibly valuable. This meant that films were increasingly designed to appeal to younger viewers, often at the expense of older audiences who appreciated the kind of nuanced performances that Jaeckel specialized in. Television became increasingly important to Jaeckel's livelihood during this period. From 1991 to 94, he played Lieutenant Ben Edwards on the hit series Baywatch. His recurring role as Lieutenant Ben Edwards on Baywatch introduced him to a whole new generation of viewers, though it was quite different from the gritty war films and westerns that had made his reputation. The show's focus on attractive young lifeguards in swimsuits was about as far from The Dirty Dozen as possible. But Jaeckel approached it with his characteristic professionalism. Working on Baywatch presented unique challenges for an actor of Jaeckel's generation and experience. The show was designed around young, attractive cast members, and the plots were relatively simple compared to the complex dramas he was used to. However, he found ways to bring depth to his character and became a stabilizing presence on set. What many viewers didn't realize was that by the time he appeared on Baywatch, Jaeckel was already in his 60s and had been working in Hollywood for nearly 50 years. While the show's younger cast members were just beginning their careers, he was a veteran who had worked alongside some of the greatest names in cinema history. Yet, he never acted like he was above the material or too good for television work. He understood that the industry had changed, and he adapted accordingly. Behind the scenes, however, the constant adaptation was taking its toll. Friends and colleagues noticed that Jaeckel seemed tired in ways that went beyond normal fatigue. The relentless pace of television production, combined with the physical demands of many of his roles, was wearing him down. He had spent decades performing his own stunts and doing whatever was required to make scenes look authentic, and his body was beginning to show the effects. The financial realities of character acting also became more apparent during this period. While leading men commanded millions of dollars per film, character actors like Jaeckel earned modest salaries that required them to work constantly to maintain their lifestyle. There were no massive paydays or profit participation deals for supporting players, just steady work at reasonable rates. This meant that even an actor with Jaeckel's extensive resume couldn't afford to be too selective about roles. Industry insiders began to notice changes in Jaeckel's behavior that suggested deeper problems. He occasionally seemed confused during filming, forgot lines that he would have memorized effortlessly in earlier years, and appeared to be losing weight. At first, these changes were subtle enough that they could be attributed to normal aging or the stress of constant work. But for those who knew him well, the changes were concerning. The entertainment industry of the 1990s was also becoming more corporate than ever before. The personal relationships that had once defined Hollywood were being replaced by business decisions made by executives who often didn't know the actors personally. This shift meant that veteran performers like Jaeckel lost some of the protection and loyalty they had once enjoyed. Despite these challenges, Jaeckel continued to approach each role with the same dedication that had characterized his entire career. He never complained publicly about the changing industry or expressed bitterness about younger actors getting opportunities that might once have gone to more experienced performers. His professionalism remained intact, even as his options became more limited. As the mid-1990s approached, those closest to Jaeckel began to suspect that something more serious than career challenges was affecting their friend and colleague. A hero's final battle. In 1994, the worst fears of Richard Jaeckel's family and friends were confirmed when he received a diagnosis that would change everything: terminal cancer. The disease had been growing silently while he continued to work, explaining the weight loss, fatigue, and confusion that had worried those around him. For a man whose entire identity was built around strength, reliability, and helping others tell their stories, The diagnosis represented not just a medical crisis, but an existential challenge. The type of cancer that struck Jaeckel was aggressive and had already spread by the time it was detected. Doctors gave him limited time, and the treatment options available in the mid-1990s were far less advanced than what would be available today. Suddenly, the man who had spent 50 years portraying characters facing impossible odds found himself in the most difficult role of his life. A real person fighting a battle he couldn't win through determination alone. The news hit his family like a devastating blow. Antoinette, who had been his partner through 50 years of marriage, suddenly found herself in the role of caregiver and advocate. Their children, now adults with families of their own, struggled to accept that their strong, reliable father was facing something he couldn't overcome through willpower and hard work. What made the diagnosis particularly cruel was its timing. Jaeckel had been looking forward to spending more time with his family and perhaps taking on more selective, meaningful roles as he entered what should have been a comfortable retirement. He had plans to travel with Antoinette, to spend more time with his grandchildren, and maybe to write about his experiences in Hollywood. All of these dreams suddenly seemed impossible. The financial implications of the diagnosis were immediate and devastating. Cancer treatment was expensive, and while Jaeckel had worked steadily for decades, character actors of his era didn't earn the kind of money that provided for extended medical care. The residual payments from his extensive filmography helped, but they weren't nearly enough to cover the mounting medical bills. For the first time in his adult life, Jaeckel found himself facing financial uncertainty. Health insurance in the 1990s wasn't as comprehensive as it is today, especially for serious illnesses like cancer. Many treatments were considered experimental and weren't covered. The family found themselves in the position of having to make medical decisions based partly on what they could afford, rather than simply what was best for Jaeckel's care. Even more challenging was the end of his ability to work. Acting had been more than just Jaeckel's profession. It had been his passion, his identity, and his way of connecting with the world. The sets where he had spent most of his adult life were now off-limits to him. The colleagues who had become like family were moving forward with their careers while he was forced to step aside. The silence that replaced the constant activity of working was perhaps the most difficult adjustment of all. Jaeckel had always been a private person, but the illness forced him to become even more withdrawn. He didn't want people to see him weak or struggling. The man who had always been the one others could depend on found it incredibly difficult to accept help from others. His pride, which had been one of his greatest strengths throughout his career, now became an obstacle to getting the support he needed. As word of his condition spread quietly through Hollywood, the response revealed both the best and worst aspects of the entertainment industry. Some colleagues and friends rallied around Jaeckel and his family, offering both emotional and financial support. These were often people who had worked with him decades earlier but still remembered his kindness and professionalism. Their loyalty demonstrated the genuine affection that many people felt for him personally. However, the broader industry response was disappointingly muted. There were no major fundraising events, no celebrity-studded benefits, and no studio executives making grand gestures of support. The same industry that had profited from Jaeckel's work for 50 years seemed to view his illness as a private matter that didn't require institutional response. This silence spoke volumes about how Hollywood treated its veteran character actors when they were no longer able to contribute to current projects. The Motion Picture and Television Fund, an industry charity that provided care for entertainment workers in need, became Jaeckel's lifeline during this period. The organization had been founded specifically to help people like him, industry veterans who had given their careers to Hollywood but found themselves without adequate resources in their time of greatest need. For Jaeckel, accepting this help was both a blessing and a reminder of how precarious even a successful career could be. The fund's facility in Woodland Hills became Jaeckel's home during his final years. While it provided excellent medical care and support, it was a painful reminder of how far he had fallen from his days as a working actor. The man who had once commanded respect on movie sets was now dependent on charity for his basic needs. Friends who visited Jaeckel during this period were struck by his continued grace under pressure. Despite facing his own mortality and watching his family struggle with mounting medical bills, he never expressed bitterness or self-pity. The same qualities that had made him such an effective actor, his dignity, his strength, and his concern for others, sustained him during the darkest period of his life, the silent goodbye. On June 14, 1997, Richard Jaeckel passed away at the age of 70, surrounded by his family at the Motion Picture and Television Fund facility in Woodland Hills, California. His death marked the end of an era in Hollywood, though few in the industry seemed to recognize it at the time. The man who had appeared in over 70 films and countless television shows left this world with the same quiet dignity that had characterized his entire career. The immediate aftermath of Jaeckel's death revealed just how much the entertainment industry had changed since his early days. In the golden age of Hollywood, the death of an actor with his credentials and longevity would have prompted widespread tributes, retrospective screenings, and extensive media coverage. Instead, Jaeckel's passing was noted in the trade publications and mentioned briefly in some newspapers, but it failed to generate the kind of sustained attention that his contributions deserved. This muted response wasn't necessarily a reflection of malice or deliberate disrespect. Rather, it demonstrated how the accelerated pace of modern entertainment had created a culture where yesterday's stars were quickly forgotten in favor of today's headlines. The news cycle that might once have devoted days to remembering a veteran performer now moved on to other stories within hours. For an actor whose greatest strength had been consistency rather than headline-grabbing behavior, this new reality was particularly harsh. The funeral services for Jaeckel were attended by family members and a small group of industry colleagues who had worked with him over the years. These gatherings provided an opportunity for those who knew him personally to share memories and pay their respects, but they lacked the public dimension that might have educated younger generations about his contributions to American cinema. The stories told at these intimate gatherings painted a picture of a man who had remained humble and generous throughout his career, never allowing success to change his fundamental character. Among those who attended were actors from different eras of his career. Veterans from his early war films mixed with colleagues from his television work, creating a unique gathering that reflected the breadth and longevity of his career. Each group had different memories of Jaeckel, but all shared similar impressions of his professionalism and kindness. In the weeks following his death, a few film critics and industry historians began to write more thoughtful pieces about Jaeckel's career and its significance. These articles highlighted his versatility, his professionalism, and his ability to elevate every project he touched. They pointed out that, while he may never have been a leading man, he had been an essential component of dozens of films that were now considered classics. Without actors like Jaeckel, these movies would have lacked the authentic texture that made them memorable. The timing of Jaeckel's death also coincided with broader changes in how people consumed entertainment. The rise of home video and cable television was making it easier for audiences to discover older films, which meant that Jaeckel's work was actually becoming more accessible to new generations, even as the industry that created it was forgetting his contributions. Viewers watching The Dirty Dozen, or sometimes A Great Notion on television, could appreciate his performances without knowing anything about his personal struggles or the circumstances of his death. His peak film career, years from 1967 to 1975, continued to find audiences long after his death, ensuring that his legacy would survive even if the industry had moved on. Movies like The Dirty Dozen, The Devil's Brigade, Chisholm, sometimes A Great Notion, and Ulzana's Raid remained popular with audiences who appreciated classic filmmaking and authentic performances. The financial situation that Jaeckel's family faced after his death highlighted one of the harsh realities of character acting in Hollywood. Despite his extensive resume and decades of steady work, there was no vast estate to settle or fortune to inherit. The medical bills from his final illness had consumed much of what savings he had accumulated, And the residual payments from his films, while helpful, were not substantial enough to provide long-term security for his survivors. This economic reality served as a sobering reminder that even successful careers in Hollywood could be precarious. The studio system that had once provided more comprehensive support for veteran performers had largely disappeared, replaced by a more fragmented industry where individual actors were responsible for their own financial planning and security. For character actors like Jaeckel, who often worked project to project without the massive paydays that leading men enjoyed, this shift created significant vulnerabilities. Antoinette Jaeckel faced the challenge of rebuilding her life after 50 years of marriage. The entertainment industry offered little ongoing support for the widows of character actors, despite their husbands' contributions to countless successful films. She found herself relying on the kindness of friends and the limited benefits available through industry organizations. As 1997 came to an end, Richard Jaeckel's death had already faded from public memory, though his work continued to entertain audiences around the world. The disconnect between his artistic legacy and his public recognition would become a recurring theme in discussions about how Hollywood treats its veteran performers, setting the stage for broader conversations about loyalty, recognition, and the true cost of entertainment industry success. Richard Jaeckel's story isn't one of scandal or failure. It's something far more heartbreaking, the tale of a devoted craftsman who gave everything to his art, only to be quietly forgotten when he needed support most. His death revealed uncomfortable truths about Hollywood's treatment of character actors and the fragile nature of industry loyalty. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks.